Hello, my name is Harmer Sipkema. I'm a Dutch voice talent slash composer slash audio engineer. A while ago I showed off a little system I made with a MIDI controller and a joystick controlling several functions in Nuendo. And if I were a professional vlogger, I would now continue by saying that there were a lot of people who asked me the question how that was done, but I'm not. So I'll just admit that I offered making a movie, and there were two people who responded mildly positive on the idea of me explaining how it works. So here goes. I'll not pretend that a lot of people are interested in it, but if you are, this is how it works. I use a Fader Fox EC4, and I was using this joystick. It's a Logitech. So a Logitech Attack 3. I think it's discontinued by Logitech, but it's a USB joystick. The thing is that Nuendo or Cubase don't really respond to MIDI controllers in the way I wanted it to. I wanted to control several functions like scrolling through the tracks, zooming horizontally, vertically, and moving the cursor and so on. And you can't really do that by turning knobs. So I made a little patch in a program called Max MSP, which is basically a programming language for MIDI and audio by Cycling 74. It's not a programming language in the sense that you have to type lines of code, but you just connect boxes together, and it's amazingly powerful, and you can do really complex stuff with it. And in Nuendo I use the generic remote to link MIDI messages to certain commands. On both subjects, both MaxMSP and the generic remote function in Cubase and Nuendo, there are several tutorials that are really good. I'm not going into that in detail. You can find out how that works on your own. But I will describe how I made this do what it's not intended for, and how I made Nuendo respond in a way that it was not made for. So the first thing you need to know is that there are several types of MIDI control messages, the continuous controller, MIDI CC. The basic one is showing, it's corresponding to a position of a knob or fader, and is ranging from 0 to 127. So if you move the fader down or turn the knob down, it's 0, and if you turn it all the way up, it's 127. There's a high resolution variation on that, which has 16,000 something values. Much more accurate. I'm not even sure if the numbers are right, but that doesn't really matter. Then there's also, and this is important for us, there's a relative MIDI controller message, and the relative function is just sending out messages to indicate that a knob is turned counterclockwise or clockwise. So those are separate messages, and the nice thing about that is there's no limit. You can turn it right and keep turning it right, and it will keep sending messages about what you're doing. So that's the function you need if you need a MIDI, if you use a MIDI controller to do this. Now in Cubase, into generic remote, you can't read you can't read relative MIDI messages for some reason. There is something you can check in one of the drop-down menus that says relative, but it doesn't do this. I don't know what it does actually. Frankly, I don't care, because it doesn't do what I want it to. So the next step was to translate these clockwise and counterclockwise messages to something that Nuendo does listen to. And that is note on messages. could be note on and note off messages, but I chose to work with note on messages only because, well, mostly I didn't manage to get the note off messages working. It would make more sense if it would be clockwise note on messages and counterclockwise note off messages, but I don't know, I didn't get it to work. So I have per encoder, clockwise is message 2, note 2, counterclockwise is note 1. And then the second encoder is counterclockwise is note 3, and clockwise is note 4, and so on. So this is what I made in Max MSP, and then when that was up and running and worked really nicely, I work really fast with Nuendo now, because I can trim, I can nudge horizontally, I can zoom waveforms, I can even change the event volume. So if I select an event and like a little audio clip, I can change the level by just turning a knob, and it really speeds up my work a lot. Well, I guess I'll just show you the Max patch and how it's set up and how it responds in Nuendo. Let's get into that. All right, the joystick. Because this was up and running, I thought, well, let's see what I can do with the joystick, because Max MSP can read human interface devices such as joysticks, and I thought I might as well see if I can get that working, because it seemed like a good idea to have a joystick to run through the timeline with the cursor and to move in the track list up and down and so on. But frankly, it's not. It really sucks. But you know, I wanted to see if I could make it work, and I could. But it's completely useless. But I'll show you how it works nonetheless. So here we are. This is the Fader Fox EC4, and this is the Logitech Attack 3. As you can see, you can on the little screen you can have 4-character indication of what knob does what. I'll just do a quick walkthrough and just show you how it works, how I set it up. Here's the track selection. As you can see, it's quite accurate. I can move fast because there's an acceleration function on it. So if you move it fast, it will send more messages, and if you move it slow, it's quite accurate. So if I just want to go up one track, it's not difficult to get it right. But if you move it fast, you can also really go through a big session. This is, for me, this is a relatively small session. Some of my sessions are 80-90 tracks, depending on if I have multiple vocalists and so on. Then this one, the cursor takes you through the timeline. I can zoom horizontally and zoom vertically. I can zoom the waveform in and out, which is also very useful. I do that a lot. I can change the snap mode. You see the top right of the screen. I prefer grid relative most of the time. I can change the snap mode, which mostly is on use quantize, and I can change the quantize value. The quantize value, I think, corresponds to what is used for the horizontal scrolling. So if I change that to bars and beats, it skips one bar now every time it receives a clockwise message. And if I change the quantize to a smaller value, I can really do small movements. Now for scrolling, that's not so useful, but if I go back a bit and scroll down and zoom horizontally and vertically, I can easily demonstrate the use of smaller quantization values, because I can put this up to 128th and do some trimming. Small accurate changes to the clip. I can change the fade. If I want to change it a bit faster, I can just do it like that, and change the quantize resolution, and then my trimming will be more, how do you say that? Well, have bigger steps. I don't know the right English word for that at the moment. So that's a very useful thing. And also what I use a lot is the event volume. Something I still want to add is an easy way to get to the next clip. I think Alt N is something for that. I know N and B are doing something, but I don't remember. Anyway, that's the hardware side of things. Now, how do you get that to work? This is Max MSP, and between Max MSP and Nuendo, there needs to be a connection, and for that I use, what is it? Loop MIDI. That is right here. Loop MIDI is an inter-application MIDI system. You have the same thing on Apple. I don't remember the name. Maybe it's in the OS embedded. I don't remember. I used it, but I forgot. I made a connection from Max to DAW and from DAW to Max. So Nuendo can talk to Max and Max can talk to Nuendo. Every knob has on the controller has this combination of boxes. The first box is the type of control in, so that's what this box does. It lets a MIDI controller in. It listens to the hardware device named FaderFox EC4. That is how it is identified in the system. It listens to channel 1, controller 1. When I turn this knob, it sends out messages. Maybe I can use a integer box to show you the values. There you go. Okay, if I turn this knob clockwise, it sends out message number 1. If I turn this knob counterclockwise, it sends out message 127. I really don't know why. To me, the other way around would make more sense, which also explains why I configured it wrong the first time and then just crossed the wires to make it work the way I wanted to. But now counterclockwise sends out a bang, which is basically a trigger. So every time the knob is making one step counterclockwise, it just repeats this trigger. And if I send it counterclockwise, it repeats this trigger. This is then sends a message to the node out box. Node out is a box, a command in Max MSP that requires a list as input. And this list is, every time this list is sent, it sends out a note as described by that list. This box tells the node out box this message tells the node out box to send out node number 0 with a velocity of 127. So that's a node on message. Node 0 on. This box sends out node number 1. So now we have node number 0, node number 1. Number 0, number 1, number 0, number 1, number 0, number 1. As you can see in the background, in Nuendo, tracks are moving. Track selection is moving up and down. Now, what happens in Nuendo? There's the studio setup. I have a number of generic remotes configured. Stream Deck, which I use a lot. I have Meta System on the iPad, which is a great system and really worth a little investment. Compliments to the makers. This is another Meta System generic remote, but number 2 is Max to DAW and DAW to Max. So this is the generic remote that corresponds to the Max system. Now here is the MIDI controller 1. Counterclockwise is node on 0. And the second one is note on message 1. So note 1 on. And then here you can just link the commands. There's a lot you can do here. And every time you select a column, there's a sub-selection that corresponds to that. So in for the counterclockwise movement of encoder 1, I selected command. From the available sub menus of command, I selected project, and inside project I selected select track previous. Now for the clockwise movement, also command project, but then select track next. The same thing for the next encoder, counterclockwise, nudge cursor left, and clockwise, nudge cursor right. And that's basically it. It's no rocket science, it's not very difficult, and there's no magic involved. And it works every time. The only thing I really need to do is I need to start Nuendo first and then start MaxMSP, because otherwise it gets confused. I think MaxMSP has the tendency to reserve certain MIDI devices, and it won't listen to my keys anymore. I can't play keys inside into Nuendo, but that's the only weird thing. I'm sure I could find a way around that by having MaxMSP forward this all MIDI inputs to Nuendo anyway. But as it is now, I'm really happy with this setup, and if you want to learn more about it, just please watch some MaxMSP tutorials, watch some generic remote tutorials, and if you have really specific questions on how I configured my system, please let me know. If you're interested, I should show you something about the joystick, because I think I promised that. I don't even remember. This video is getting a lot longer than I intended, but that's how it goes, I guess. The central element of human interfaces inside Max is this one, the HI box. The HI box takes a number of commands. One is menu. Menu, the menu message sent to HI makes HI send out a list of available human interface devices. In my setup, there's only one available. So after this list is made, 1 second after, load bang means send a trigger once the patch is loaded, once this file is loaded. So after 1 second, it sends out a bang to this little menu that is derived from the output of this wire, and then the name of that first device is sent to the human interface box. Please note, this only works correctly because I have only one device. Otherwise I would have to maybe write the name of the Logitech Attack 3 in a box and then have that sent to the HI device. What the output of the HI does is, and I'll show you. There we go. It's relatively small, but I hope you can read it. If I move the joystick, I'm moving it up, there's a list coming out, which is the number of the parameter and the value of the parameter. Took me a bit to find out which does what, but I made this object, route, which routes every value of each parameter to a separate output. So I have the x-axis, the y-axis, the little throttle wheel, and all of the buttons. And all these outputs, all these output values go to this little thingy I made up. Let me zoom out a bit. I basically put it this way because I couldn't remember which is what. So I made a little system that corresponds to all the bits and pieces. If you watch this button, for example, this value, if I press this, it says 128. If I let it go, it says 0. And this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and there's triggers. There's buttons on the side. Each has a value. I use this joystick live a lot, so maybe there's some of the buttons are a bit sticky, probably got beer in them or something. And the x-axis and the y-axis, and there's your little throttle. Now, all nice and well, but how do you let that control anything useful? Let me see. Okay, let's just focus on the x-axis for now. What I wanted the joystick to do is to scroll faster left and right in the timeline if I move the joystick further. So a little bit to the left would just move the cursor really slow. A little bit further to the left would move the cursor a little bit faster, and all the way to the left should really speed things left and right. I made a scale here. The values that come out of this x-axis or both axes, you can see here. It's in the center. It's around 33,000. If I go all the way to the left, it's 0. If I go all the way to the right, it's 65,534. But I only needed 8 segments approximately. Why 8? Well, because I want 3 on the left, 3 on the right, and I don't want the center to be really small, so I made 3 in the center. So I actually have 9 values. 0, 1, and 2 are different speeds of left. 3, 4, and 5 are, well, they're all 0 because it doesn't do anything, and 6, 7, and 8 correspond to different speeds of moving to the right, moving the cursor to the right. The center section had to be a little bit bigger, so that's why there are 3 center numbers, 3, 4, and 5, because I don't want to accidentally touch that joystick and have things move about. I want to have control and not accidents. So that's how I divided the axes from 665,000 something to only 9 segments by scale, which says from 200 to 63,000 should correspond to 0 to 8, and then this one sends out a bang if a certain number is on. Now, all nice and well, but I needed to have a repeating keystroke or repeating command MIDI message send. So that's what the Metro object does. There's all these cables are basically doing one thing. If a certain segment is selected, all the other segments should be off. So that's what this is all about. Zeros and ones. So for example, this 1 is connected to output number 0, so it's the most left part of the x-axis, and this 0 is connected to all other outputs. So whatever output is selected, if it's not output 0, this will be off, and that's the same for the rest of them. So this one is connected to this one is connected to output number 1, and the rest, and this 0 is connected to all other outputs. So this will only be on if this specific segment of the x-axis is used on the joystick. Now, because there are actually a lot of numbers
that fit in one segment. If it's somewhere between 200 and 500 and you move the joystick only a tiny bit, it will send out a stream of values which correspond to a stream of, now let's say, ones, and that would send out a stream of messages to the Metro, and it would do a lot more than just the speed that I wrote down here. So that's what the change message does. That reduces the amount of messages to only the messages that are different from the last message. You can look it up in the Max MSP help. It's quite self-explanatory. Then the Metro objects send out triggers at a certain rate or interval. So per segment the speed changes. Imagine the center is right here where the mouse is now, where the cursor is now. If you move it a little bit to the left, every half a second a trigger will be sent. If you move it further to the left, every quarter second, 250 milliseconds, a trigger will be sent. And if you move it all the way to the left, every tenth of a second, every 100 milliseconds, a trigger will be sent. And then the same story as before, note messages are sent out. These are actually the same, 227, 327, as you can find. Oh, how do we do that? Here, because it does exactly the same thing as encoder 2. So I just copied this part. Encoder 2 is scrolling the cursor, and the x-axis on the joystick is scrolling the cursor. Now the resolution is quite fine at the moment, but I changed it using the quantize knob, and now I can just use the joystick. Still not as accurate or fine controllable as the knobs, but I promised I would show how it works, even though it's completely useless. That's how it works. There you go. Yep. If anyone has any questions, let me know, and if I can answer them without pointing you to Max MSP tutorials or Google, I will definitely answer. Cheers, bye bye.